Started. Great. So as I had already said, hello to everyone. I'm so excited that you're all here. We are so glad that you've joined us today, wherever you are tuning in from. We're a global organization, so it's really exciting to see everyone from around the world. And thank you for taking this time for yourself and for being part of this conversation. I'm especially excited to welcome back our guest, Professor Clare Mackay. Many of you may remember her from a previous session we had earlier on in the year. And if you're meeting her for the very first time today, you're in for something really special. If you're interested in what happened in that last session, or if you want to rewatch it, you can find the recording on our YouTube channel. If you need any details on where to find this, just let me know in the comments and I'll share that information with you. So Professor Clare Mackay is a professor of neuroscience at the University of Oxford, and she brings such a rare combination to this space. She's not only a leading researcher studying the brain, but she also has lived experience, having struggled with trichotillomania, which is hair pulling, picking and biting since the age of 12. What makes Clare's work so powerful is how she weaves together both worlds, her personal story of moving through shame and secrecy, and her personal mission, a professional mission, to unravel the science behind body-focused repetitive behaviours, or BFRBs for short, such as skin picking, hair pulling, and nail and cheek biting. Today, she'll help us explore one of the most common and painful questions people often ask themselves: why me? And why do I pick, pull, or bite? Together, we'll look at what neuroscience can tell us, how grooming behaviours and emotions play a role, and most importantly, how shifting the way we ask these questions can bring more understanding and self-compassion. Clare, it's such a privilege to have you here again with us. Thank you for being here and for sharing your expertise and your heart with this community.
Oh, thank you so much, Meryl. It is a pleasure to be here. I love what you do and the way you interview your guests, etc. And so I am very happy to be here and to share with you some of the things that I've been learning today.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much. And I think when we had you back in January, we still have people talk about that that first chat we had with you in that webinar. We received such positive feedback, and we just, as I said, we're so privileged to have you part of this session, but just as in a greater whole, the actual BFRB community.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. We have so much to go through, and I'm really excited about this. We did touch on very briefly a little bit about this topic in our first session at the earlier of the year. And in our pre-meeting, I think it was maybe November or December of last year, we went into a little bit more detail about this in our personal call. And it was just so interesting, and I was so intrigued. So I've been waiting for this for almost a year. So I'm really excited. But for those who do not know you yet, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do as a neuroscientist? And maybe even just explain, like, what is a neuroscientist?
Yeah, good question. Well, a neuroscientist is somebody who studies the brain one way or another. There are actually loads of different types of neuroscientists. I became interested, I did a degree in psychology, first of all, and I became interested in neuroscience kind of straight off the bat. I always was intrigued by the fact that this kind of few pounds of mush that sits inside our skulls governs everything that we are and we think and we feel, etc. And I've always been intrigued by how on earth it does what it does and how it makes us who we are. So I did a degree in psychology, and then I pretty quickly got interested in brain imaging. Actually, that was my sort of tool of choice, and so I got interested in this way that we can actually look at the brain and look at the way people's brains might be different from each other. And I was kind of the right age to grow up with imaging technology. As it grew up, I grew up, and so I got to be sort of in the cohort of people who was using brand new imaging techniques to understand the structure and function of the brain. And I studied a whole range of different diseases and disorders over the years. So for my PhD, I studied temporal lobe epilepsy and how imaging can help us figure out exactly where in the brain might be causing problems for people with epilepsy and what the cognitive or thinking consequences of those things are. And then I moved to Oxford, where I started to study schizophrenia, psychosis, and then mood disorders. And then about 15 years ago, probably 20 years ago now, I started studying aging and dementia. And that's kind of what I'm most known for. So studying the aging brain is something that I've done a lot of. But about 2 years, well, it's probably coming up for 3 years ago now, I kind of hit the wall a bit, midlife, menopause, COVID, hormones, all sorts of things. And I thought, I'm not enjoying what I'm doing anymore. I need to think about a bit of a change for myself. And so I took a bit of time off. And when I came back after my time off, I felt better, I felt refreshed. But I still was thinking, I need to do something a bit different. And slowly it emerged for me that I've been living with this disorder of my own all these years, my secret shame of my hair pulling disorder. And it kind of slowly dawned on me that I've got this 30 years of neuroscience and 40 years of living with hair pulling disorder and a whole lifetime of biting my nails. I wonder whether I can put them together and do something useful. And so that's how it all started for me.
I think that's an understatement. You are doing definitely more than useful in this space. And I think when I spoke to you in January, you had recently shared your experience with the world and the industry of your BFRBs. We're now, what is that, almost 10 months after that. You have been very busy. So I'd love I'd love for you to share with the community what you've been up to, what you've been working on, and what you can share with us.
Well, but just before I met you in January, the thing I had been very busy with was putting on the first UK BFRB conference, and so we brought together a whole range of experts from all over the world to start to try to understand urges to pick and pull and bite in a different way. So that happened exactly this time last year. And since then, I have been busy writing it all down. So I've recently finished writing a book about my journey, really, my personal journey, but also my scientific journey, to try to understand a bit more about these urges that we have to pick and pull and bite that we struggle so hard to control.
Yeah. And I'm very excited for when it does come out. I'm sure you'll be sharing with the community on how they can find the book, how they can access the book, and you'll share all of that with everybody later to come. I know we have so much to cover, so briefly, if that's possible, can you share with just the community a little bit about that journey? So what did that look like?
Yeah, so well, for me, it really started with shame. So when I talked about the process of it emerging for me that I could maybe do something useful with this knowledge that I'd accrued, that was only possible because I'd had some therapy in the intervening period as well, and I'd started to understand the extent to which the shame that I felt about my hair pulling disorder was really kind of blanketing my my curiosity, my natural. I'm a very curious person in both senses of the word, and it literally hadn't crossed my mind that I could apply some of my neuroscientific knowledge to my BFRB because I had so much shame kind of blanketing the BFRB when I think back now, I find that I find it kind of extraordinary, the power that shame has to silence us, even to ourselves, is really remarkable. And so for me, it started with a process of compassion, self-compassion, learning how to be self-compassionate, learning how to recognize the impact that shame had had on me, and to start to kind of emerge from that lake of shame, as I've called it. And then once the shame is, once I'd shaken off the cloak of shame, all the questions came. So we'll talk a bit more about this. I've got some slides to share with you, and the questions, the scientific questions started to come. And so I just started to talk to people, and because of the fantastic, I'm in a very privileged position because of the job that I have, that I can go and knock on the doors of world experts in this, that, and the other, around my own institution and in other institutions, and have a chat about various aspects of what it is to live with urges to pick and pull and bite. And assembling some of them for the first time was what we did in the conference, and then really just kind of going back to school with it, you know. So I've got a whole bunch of neuroscience on board already, but actually there's lots of areas of science that I didn't know anything about, that I've learned about in the last couple of years, that I think are highly relevant to BFRBs, but perhaps they're not as well known as they should be to those of us who live with them.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And in our pre-call before this discussion, we were talking about questions that we ask ourselves, and you really touched on an important aspect that I'd like you to go into a little bit before we go into the reasons as to why we pick, pull, or bite. Tell me a little bit about the questions that we ask ourselves. It's why me? Why can't I stop? And you mentioned something about these negative types of questions. And I love the fact that when you said you took that blanket off of shame, you started asking scientific questions. Tell me a little, and me and the audience, a little bit about how we frame questions in our mind about this.
Yeah, so that takes me straight into my slide. Shall I share my slides? I've got just a few slides to share with you.
Yes, let's do
and
that.
we can, and I will go into that in some detail. So let's just.
Great.
Oh, it's not, sharing's not turned on, Meryl. Can you turn sharing on?
There you go.
Thank you. Okay. So here we have, it's coming. So hopefully you can see that.
Yes.
Full screen now, can you?
I can see it.
So
yes.
so we talked about what would be most useful for people today, and we thought we would focus on this question of why me. But I'm gonna start by talking a bit about those about the way we ask ourselves questions. And we thought we'd have a go today at doing a bit of an interactive thing. So I'm my first slide is to invite you to, hopefully you can see this, to join a Mentimeter. So this is a completely anonymous. I can't see any of you or anything that you say. But if you'd like to join in, I'm going to ask you the audience, some questions. And if you'd like to join in, you can either go to menti.com and put in that code, or you can take a photo of, or not take a photo, but just point your phone at the QR code on the right. Completely optional. Please don't worry if it's not for you. But if you'd like to join in with some of the questions, then that's the way to do it. I will. Oh, good. I've got some thumbs up, and I can see some people emerging. I'll just give it another moment so that we can have a good number of people on here. Meryl,
I just want to do a quick audio check. There was a message in the chat that someone wasn't able to hear us. Just a thumbs up. Can you guys hear us well? Let's hope those thumbs come. Yes. Okay. Excellent. Excellent.
It just occurred to me that it'd be a good idea to write the code in the chat. But
that is a great idea.
Do you have can you do that? I don't think I can do that because I'm presenting.
Yeah, I can do that for you.
Thanks.
You can go ahead.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. And lovely to see several of you have joined the Mentimeter. So some questions will be coming, but not quite yet, because first I'm going to start with with really kind of trying to understand why it is that we don't ask ourselves good questions when we have BFRBs. And this is a slide which is all about stigma. So this is this slide shows on the left-hand side 3 groups of professionals. So on the top we have medical and clinical professionals. In the middle we have hair and beauty professionals, and on the bottom we have scientists and researchers. So that's my gang. And these are all things that I've heard with my own ears. So they've all never heard of it. They've all never heard of BFRBs, all of these groups of people. The medics and clinicians are saying, oh, it's not a proper condition. Well, I've never seen a patient. It's all just attention seeking. The hair and beauty professionals are saying it's not a hair problem. It's not, it's disgusting. And the scientists are kind of saying, well, isn't it just a version of this disorder or that disorder? Or I've never noticed and therefore it doesn't count, or you're never going to get funding for this because it's not an interesting enough problem. And unfortunately, because that's the level of understanding even within experts, it's also all that we hear from our friends and family. And really what we hear as people with BFRBs most loudly is, why don't you just stop? So that kind of leaves us with, you know, none of these people who are supposed to help us are helping us. So we're kind of left with a horrible question, which is, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And why is nobody able to help me with it? And this starts off a process, and I'm going to bring in the Dementors. So for those of you who don't know Harry Potter, Dementors are the terrible swirling black things that can suck your life force out of you. And here you can see some Dementors that start to swirl when we're feeling so isolated with problems like this. And here are some of the words that I would have said in my own head. These are the things that I would have said to myself. I'm weak, I'm damaged, I have no self-control, I'm weird, it's disgusting, I'm a freak, I'm broken, I'm ugly. And these are really, really terrible things to live with. This is an awful way to live our lives. And I spent 40 years living with these words rattling around in my head. So my first question to all of you is whether this is familiar to you. So here comes your first question. And this, now on your phones, you should see a question. You should see the question on your phone. Yep, there we go. I can see people starting to recognize those. Oh, look at that. It's, I mean, I thought that this would be the case. It's heartbreaking that most of you recognize all of those words, because it's so common that if we're living with something that's so highly stigmatized, that all we know is to say to ourselves those awful words. And that's what I meant about that kind of cloak of shame. So that's where that is the sound of that cloak of shame. Those are awful things to live with, and they're wrong. So there we have the there we have. And so for me, this idea of shedding those words, you know, learning how not to use those words, is how the Trick Prof, that's what I call myself, started to emerge. And so here are some different questions that we can ask ourselves, or different ways to think about the problem of our picking, pulling and biting. And this is really the structure of the middle bit of the book that I have just written. So I'm going to take you through this worm or hair of the experience of picking and pulling and biting. So the first question is what I'm calling the predisposition. The question is, why me? What is it about me that makes me unable to control these urges to pick and pull and bite? Why do I experience these urges? What actually are these urges? So the next bit along is, what is the nature of that urge? What does it actually feel like? What's it similar to? What might be causing those feelings, those sensations? So what makes me want to do it? What are those urges like? And then we move along to thinking about the action itself. Why am I doing this? What is the sequence of actions? What is making me do it? What's the reward? What's the decision that my brain is making to do this? And so there's lots of interesting things to think about there. And then we move along a little bit further and we can ask ourselves the question, okay, so I'm doing it. Now, why can't I stop? So why am I stuck in this cycle of picking, pulling or biting? And why can't I just stop like everybody tells me I should be able to? And there's some interesting reasons why that might be. And then the last bit is the consequences. And so it's also a very interesting question to ask ourselves, why do I feel so badly about this behavior of mine? What is it about this behavior that makes me feel so bad about myself? So I've explored all of these areas, and we thought that it would be crazy for us to try to cover all of this today, but I wanted to give you a kind of just a quick overview of all of these different areas before we kind of go into the specifics of the first bit. So we're going to start with the first bit, which is to think about why me. Shall I carry on, Meryl, or do you want to stop and ask anything?
I do want to ask one question. You probably are going to answer this in your answer, but why is it important to ask the question, why me? Maybe not why is it important, but why are so many people asking this? And again, we did have a conversation about this in our call. Again, it's trying to understand that I'm not broken. It's trying to give some direction on, okay, this is an actual disorder. Now I know that I'm not crazy. I'm not all of those little dementors you referenced there.
The dementors,
Yes. So why is that question so important? Why me?
Well, that's a good question, and I think partly my answer is because it is what we ask ourselves. Well, it certainly was what I asked myself. Many times I wondered why I didn't know anyone else who couldn't resist the urge to pull out their hair. So why couldn't I? Why couldn't I? And so there's a kind of cruel way to ask ourselves that question, which has the implication that we're broken in it. But then there's a much more kind of compassionate and interesting way to ask exactly the same question, which is, what is it that gives rise to urges to pick and pull and bite? Why do we humans pick and pull and bite? And so it's really about learning how to be compassionate about these urges that we live with. And I think it's the beginning of being able to be compassionate, is to ask the question, what is it about me that makes me have these urges?
Mm-hmm. So take us through, what is a predisposition? What does that mean? And I know that's going to lead you into this spiral, this worm, this hair of explanation. So what is a predisposition?
So a predisposition means something about us that puts us at risk. That's the way to think about it. So in scientific terms, we talk about people being predisposed if they carry a particular gene. So a risk gene for something, for example, you might be predisposed to something if you've had a particular experience. So maybe a traumatic experience might make you predisposed. But actually, there are other reasons why you might be predisposed to something that aren't actually anything to do with you as an individual. It's just to do with being a human, or being a primate, or being an organism that is put together in the way that we're put together. And so for me, it's about understanding, about being compassionate about what it is that gives rise to these urges. Right. I'll carry on, shall I? So
yeah, please.
So I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but for why me, we're going to have a think about these aspects of what creates predisposition to pick and pull and bite. So I'm going to talk about animal grooming, emotion regulation, and I'm going to tell you something about the skin and mind. Just before I do, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of the categories of things that are in the other sections of the worm. So urges come in different flavors. We can talk about that either later or another time. The actions are really interesting. There's a ritual in there, there's decision making in there, and there's something rewarding that we don't fully understand in there. Why do we get stuck, or how do we get stuck? I think that there's something really important about the kind of trance-like state that we go into when we have BFRBs. And then in terms of the consequences, there's a whole range of things that that make us feel bad about living with these disorders. But before I tell you what I think about the predisposition, I thought I would ask you all what you think about it. So there's now a new question in your Mentimeter, and in this case, what's going to appear here is a word cloud. So I'd love it if people could think of their own ideas about what might be the cause, or why do you think you, or if you're here on the behalf of a loved one, why do you think you or your loved one have a BFRB? That's great. And you can put as many as you like in. So we'll watch a few come in, and as it builds up our word our word cloud here.
Amazing. So these are all the answers.
These are all the answers as they're coming in.
Great.
These are people's
Great.
answers.
Yeah.
Interesting. So anxiety is being is a big one. And then we've got various other things showing up. Mums and dads, puberty, yep, neurodivergence, yep. Excellent. This is brilliant. This is brilliant. Keep them coming. I'll be able to once people have finished, I'll be able to share these with you afterwards, Meryl. So
I love that.
Put them onto a post or something.
I love that.
But isn't it interesting? Look at all of the different things that people have
It is.
in terms of their ideas about what causes their BFRBs. This is amazing. Amazing. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for
yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Keep go. You can keep going, and as I talk, if you like, and we'll come back and see what it looks like in the end. That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so
did you bring your little friend with you?
Oh, do you know what? He's in my office, in my work office, and I'm at home. My little friend's not here, so we'll have to make do with this picture instead, I'm afraid. So anybody who's heard me talk about BFRBs knows that I love primates. Primates make me feel soothed, because primates pick and pull and bite all the time. And if you want to feel compassion, if you want to feel seen and understood, just go and hang out at a zoo somewhere where there are primates to watch. You'll see that they pick and pull and bite all the time. They do it to each other, they do it to themselves. Nobody minds, everybody expects it. It is completely normal primate behavior. And these grooming behaviors, picking, pulling, biting, evolved as a way to take care of our body surface. So they evolved in not just in primates, in every animal species, as a way to take care of the outside of our body, to remove parasites, to just keep clean, for hygiene reasons, really. But in many species, and all sorts of different types of species, grooming behaviors have over time, over thousands, hundreds of thousands, millennia of years, have evolved different functions, other functions. And in primates in particular, grooming is a way of regulating emotions. And so you see this in lots of primate species, that if you know that they are stressed, so they get stressed, for example, by a stranger coming into their patch, and they'll all make lots of noise, and they'll get very het up and excited. And then the way they calm themselves down again afterwards is to groom. And again, they do it to each other, and they do it to themselves. And it is a way that primates regulate emotions, calm themselves down after a period of either anxiety or overexcitement or whatever it might be. And what we also know from the animal world is that animals in distress overgroom. So this is a common phenomenon. It is seen in here. This is a picture of a chimpanzee who's in captivity and is overgroomed. These are very small images, so I don't know whether you can tell that the bottom left one is a chicken. So chickens who are in overcrowded conditions will pull out their feathers. Cats, often if you put a cat in a cattery, it will come home with a bare patch of skin, because animals that are in environments where they're not enjoying themselves will overgroom. It is seen throughout the animal kingdom. There's nothing special about us humans in that respect. And
Claire, do you know how many times I've seen a picture of a primate just like this one with hair loss, and I've never, ever up until this very moment realized that was due to self-soothing or pulling out their own hair. I didn't know that. That is so. This is the first time I've seen this. That's amazing.
This is one of the amazing things I've learned through doing this research, and it's all in the book. Is that actually this behavior is really well known in animals. There's loads of scientific literature on overgrooming in animals, and in fact, the next thing I'm going to show you is this. This is a research paper. It's I mean, it's kind of pretty heavy going scientific, but actually, anybody can go and look it up and see. And this is a review of the masses of information that we know about grooming in rodents, in mice and rats, not rice and mats, mice and rats. And there's some really, really interesting things that we know about grooming and over grooming from mice and rats. So the first thing that I'm showing you here is that that grooming, self-grooming in mice is highly stereotyped. So mice are indeed, all mammals will learn a sequence of movements and then will execute that whole sequence of movements without doing any kind of decision making. So it's and just like we do with our BFRBs, I'm sure if I ask the question, do you have a kind of ritual associated with your you may not have ever thought about it like that, but probably the movements that you carry out, where you do it, when you do it, probably highly stereotyped and ritualized. And the reason for that is that our brains are specialized for learning that sort of thing. Our brains are amazing at learning sequences of movements and then executing them without you thinking about it ever again. That's how we learn to walk and talk and ride our bikes and do anything that we might want to do. Our brains are amazing at learning patterns and then just executing them. So our brains, those of us with BFRBs, our brains learnt that this sequence of movements, which involves picking, pulling, biting, gives me some sort of emotional relief or soothing function. So it just does it when it needs soothing. That's what our brains are doing. So first of the thing is about the ritual. The second thing is that it's very well known that these ritualized behaviors are more, animals do them more when they're stressed. So the red bars here are stressed animals and the blue bars are not stressed animals. So they spend more time grooming and they get out of sequence in their grooming behaviors more when they're stressed. Very, very well known in the animal literature. And then the final thing on this slide is about that, again, we know a huge amount about which systems in the brain are involved in the regulation of these behaviors. And as you can sort of get that's a rat brain, by the way, and you can sort of get an idea of from seeing this brain is that there are loads of brain systems involved. It's not just kind of one bit of the brain that does this one function. Lots and lots of areas of the brain are involved in the process of setting up and then maintaining these behaviors over the long term. So number one in the question of why do I pick, pull and bite, is because you're an animal and because you're a primate. That's the first answer to the question. You're a primate and you groom because that is a way of emotion regulating. And just before I go on to the next bit, because I've read all this literature, all this scientific literature about grooming in animals, this point really stood out to me, which is that when we talk about BFRBs in humans, the narrative, that we talk about is that the human is broken and we need to fix the human. But when you see another primate doing exactly the same thing, the narrative is this animal is in distress and we need to fix its environment. And it's worth just thinking about how different that is and how mean we are to ourselves about our BFRBs. And there's something we can do here, which is just about, and again, this is for me, this is what compassion looks like. Think of ourselves as distressed animals, not humans who are broken.
I agree with you, and it just reinforces, I think, your very first slide about the environment. We have such high expectations of ourselves that we have to be these perfect beings, and we are the masters of the universe. And if we can't control, if we can't manipulate our behaviors and our environments how we want them to be, we're failures and we're this and we're that and we're this, and we go through this terrible cycle of blame.
Exactly.
So this slide is just so perfect. It just explains exactly as a society how we hold ourselves and others to such an unrealistic high standard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one more.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just curious, your slide before, you were talking about that ritual that your brain goes through. And I wanted to ask you, we won't go into too much detail because that might be another webinar later on. Is that then why we get stuck in that trance-like state? Because our brain is in that mode of, okay, I've started at A and I need to get to point D of that ritual, and it's difficult to get unstuck in that. And that's also then why creating a distance between the urge and the behavior is so important.
I think that's right. I think there's a bit more to the trance-like state than that, but it is that
Yeah.
kind of yeah, probably maybe it's one for another time, but yes, that sense that we are we're effectively running a program, and we can't and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need to figure out
Yeah.
how to stop the program after it's
Yeah.
started is
Yeah.
absolutely the problem that we are faced with. We've
Mm.
got our preset program, which is to go from A
Mm.
to B, all the way along, however many
Mhm.
movements that is. I
Mhm.
want to get this hair out. I want to get that bit of skin smooth, whatever it might be. I need to get that nail, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
We are
Mhm.
once we've identified something that it's a target, that program is running, and so it is
Mhm.
absolutely about trying to figure out a way to intervene in that.
Mm. And then the other little graph that you had there about the stressed and the non-stressed, for those who are looking at that and are, I think for a lot of people, not everyone, but for a lot of people who have a BFRB, they sometimes share that they're not stressed and they're not doing this
Yep.
because they have anxiety or they're overwhelmed. But often we are not quiet enough. We don't have, that quietness in ourselves where we can actually hear that our bodies are overstimulated or overwhelmed or in a stress-like state. So even though you may not advertently identify that you're stressed, there might be some distress that is there that is causing that desire to self-soothe.
To soothe. So that's a great point, and I'm one of those people who says, actually, I'm not particularly anxious. Anxiety
Yeah,
isn't the problem that I recognize, and the way that I
yeah.
describe that difference really is that it doesn't have to be anxiety, it doesn't have to be stress. What
Mm,
it is
mm,
over arousal. So arousal
mhm,
is the word we
mhm,
use scientifically to just mean our emotions. It can be positive emotions. So one of my
mm,
triggers is being overexcited. When I've
oh,
got and actually when I give a
mhm,
talk, when I give a
mhm.
talk and there's an audience, I get really excited, and I have to be watch myself after a talk, and I'm not anxious
Mm,
because I've had a great time. I don't feel anxious. I feel good. But
yeah,
nevertheless, I'm overstimulated. And so
yeah.
it is still my body trying to bring itself back down into a sort of
Equilibrate
regulated state.
itself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
think
really
I
interesting.
think that people do often um, over assume anxiety. It's not,
Mm,
definitely not
mm,
always
mm,
anxiety, but I do think it could be over arousal of some kind,
mm,
is the
mm.
way I think about it.
That's so
Right, I'm going to tell you
interesting.
one more bit of different bit of
Please.
science, and then I'll turn off my
Yes.
screen and we can go back to full screen. So I've already talked about this bit. So our brains evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to keep us regulated. We've already been talking about this. Our brains are amazing bits of bits of flesh in our head. That their main function is to keep us safe and keep us regulated and to try to put our genes into the next generation. That's what they're there for. And our brains have all sorts of ways of doing that aren't under our conscious controls. We have a whole like section of our nervous system over which we have no conscious control. And the way that I sort of I like to help people think about this is that if you think about breathing, so we can control our breathing, but we don't. I mean, we can decide to take a deep breath, but the vast majority of the time, breathing just happens because it's part of what we call our autonomic nervous system. And so the ways that our brain has of keeping us regulated are its business really. I mean it's all us, but nevertheless it's doing stuff that we have no knowledge of, never mind any control over. So it's
Mm,
important to recognize that the one of the things that we really suffer with when we have BFRBs is feeling blamed, like we've made a decision to pick or pull or bite. And I'm
mm,
sure that I'm not alone in thinking I never
mm,
make a decision, or very
mhm.
rarely make a decision to pick up or a bite. It's something that my
Yeah.
body does, and it's something over
Yeah.
which I try to have control. But just like
Mm,
breathing, most of the time it happens without me telling it to. And
mhm,
the really, really interesting bit of science that I knew nothing about until the last year or two is the connection between our minds, and particularly our emotion systems, and our skin. So the skin is actually a really fascinating organ. And the first thing that people don't necessarily immediately realize is that hair is skin. So all of our BFRBs happen to our skin. Hair is something that grows out of our skin. It's part of our skin, and the nails are also part of our skin. That together they're called the integumentary system, but essentially they all are derived from skin. And the relationship between the skin and the mind is absolutely fascinating. And I know I sound a bit cuckoo when I say that. So here I'm going to try and explain the connection between our minds and our skin that you knew but you didn't know you knew. So when you learn neuroscience, you learn that our skin, the main function of our skin is to send sensory information into our brains. So we sense the world with our skin, and we send that information in. And of course, we also use our brains to control various aspects of our skin. And those are essentially, our brains control muscles. And so there are muscles, both the muscles that move that we're aware of, but there are also tiny, teeny, tiny muscles in our skin that make our hair stand on end, for example. So all of that, those are instructions that come from the brain to the skin. Now, this is when it gets interesting. Emotions. Our skin and our emotions are as one. So our skin was an emotion demonstrating organ before we had language in evolutionary terms. When we're embarrassed, we blush. When we're angry or frustrated, our hair stands on end, etc. And you can even think of smiling and crying as being ways that our emotions show on our skin over which we have no control. How many times have we wished we could turn down the blush when we find ourselves blushing? Our emotion system and our skin are intimately related, and we have no control over that at all. And then the next level of this is that we already know that there's a really clear relationship between our emotions and particularly stress and inflammation in the skin. So anybody who suffers from psoriasis or eczema or alopecia knows that those conditions are worse if they're stressed. So there's a kind of a triangle between stress and inflammation and our emotions, which and this relationship between the two, which is kind of well known about in dermatology, but it's never really been applied to BFRBs. But if you think about this being a direct link between stress and inflammation, well, the same could be true of BFRBs, because psoriasis or eczema or alopecia are one of the ways in which our body might respond to stress. But actually sending messages saying that bit of skin needs to be smooth, or that bit of nail needs to go, or this hair here is causing a particular problem, that's just another signal that's coming from our skin. So I think we should be thinking about our skin and the relationship between our skin. I think we should be thinking about BFRBs more like we think about, for example, chronic itch conditions or other dermatological conditions, and not just psychological conditions that have impacts on the skin. So there's the other answer to why am I predisposed to have to pick and pull and bite is because you've got skin. So
that is very fascinating. It's more like a holistic viewpoint as to why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. For those who would like to ask a question to either Professor Clare Mackay or to myself, Skin Pick or TrichStop, you can ask it in the chat. We do have a couple questions here that I'm going to read out to you, Claire, and for those who are listening. So first of all, there's a comment here. This is fascinating. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Another question is, why do some people who have more stress or trauma in their life or childhood than me don't turn to picking or pulling or biting?
Yeah, so why do we find this way of soothing our nervous systems instead of another way?
Exactly.
What I would say to that is that probably everybody finds a way. And for us, the way we found is picking, pulling, biting. I do think that there's something about the age at which we need soothing. So in my story, I had a pretty rubbish time when I was age 12, and that's when my hair pulling started. So unfortunately, I was the victim of the school bully, and so I was completely socially isolated for a while. and I was too young to turn to drugs or drink or, you know, gambling, or I didn't have access to gambling or whatever else it might be. I think that we find a way, and for us, those of us with BFRBs, the way we found was picking, pulling, and biting. So it's
I think we often hear the story or the metaphor when we describe trauma. We can all experience the same trauma, but we might not experience it the same way or internalize it the same way. Some of us can walk away from that experience and just continue life as it is, and some can experience PTSD or develop stress-like symptoms afterwards. So we can all experience stress, trauma, whatever that may be in childhood or adulthood, but the way that we internalize it can be very different from one another.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. And actually, if you take away the stigma of picking, pulling, biting, it's quite an inoffensive way to deal with our stress. It's if it didn't cause us so much, you know, that another time we'll focus on the consequences. But if it didn't cause us so much shame and distress, actually, it wouldn't be a bad way of dealing with our struggles. As I say, if you look over our primate cousins, they don't mind that each other do that, and I'd rather pull out my eyelashes than be an alcoholic. So, you know, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, I of course don't mean to belittle the struggles that we have. It's awful living with BFRBs, but I suppose I always want to encourage compassion and gentleness around these behaviors rather than thinking of them as being devastating.
Yeah. There's a comment here. Thank you so much for this information. It's the best information I've ever received about picking, pulling, and biting, and I want to share it with all my family.
Yeah.
What a lovely comment.
That's gorgeous. Thank you.
This is why we have this platform, is to provide information. And it just warms my heart to know that it's helpful. There are lots of questions coming through. It's great. Let's see. One of the best presentations I have seen in a long time. Thank you. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much. I think it is hard to stop biting my skin and nails because it gives me dopamine when I'm picking. I can literally feel the dopamine.
Yeah, so dopamine is one of the reward chemicals in our brains. It's the one that people have usually heard of, and so people usually associate dopamine with reward. And I think that, well, I know that there are different chemicals for different types of reward. So I think dopamine is part of the equation, but I don't actually necessarily think it's the reward chemical that's associated with grooming. So we know, again, from animal studies that the reward chemical that's associated with grooming in animals is endorphins. So endorphins, we more in sort of common everyday language, we know of endorphins as being what we get if we go for a run, for example. We get an endorphin high, and endorphins are endogenous morphine, so it's an opiate, so it's pretty addictive. And endorphins don't give you, so dopamine, the way I think about it is that dopamine gives you a very kind of simple and clear and acute reward feeling that I would think of as being like the first mouthful of ice cream type. That's a dopamine feeling. For me, the reward associated with picking, pulling, biting isn't quite like that. So I think of it as being more like it's a gentler reward. It's a kind of in the moment where you get the hair or the you know, the nail or whatever, there's definitely a little hit of something like dopamine. But I think the thing that might be driving it more is this sort of is this endorphin thing. And so, but it's super useful to think about it like that, because then you can think, okay, what else can give me that? And so I've already said that going for a run is a great way of getting endorphins, but there are loads of other things. You don't have to go out and exercise. You can get endorphins from singing. You can get endorphins from painting. You can get endorphins from lots of things that are much more constructive rather than destructive. And that's the way I like to think about it.
Yeah, thank you. There is a question here, what help is out there? And I'm so glad this question was asked. And for those who are not aware, I did actually not introduce myself. So I'm Meryl. I'm from SkinPick and TrichStop. So we do have a online program where we have a number of modules that are created through evidence-based techniques and protocols, and you have access to a therapist. So you go through the modules, you engage with the therapist. There are tools and exercises to help you. You learn everything about your particular BFRB, whether it's hair pulling or skin picking, and the modules help and guide you through learning how to manage your BFRB. So there is support that includes the program. There are online forums and groups online and on socials. So there is a vast community and resources out there. If you're interested, I might as well do it now. We almost are at the end of the session. So if you are interested in the program, you can use this promo code to get $100 off your first month. So you can use the promo code webinar100. If you forget or you need the correct spelling, please email me at support@trichstop.com, or for skin picking, it's support@skinpick.com, and I'll send you all the information. Okay. Let's see if we can answer a couple more questions before the end.
Can I ask? I've been looking at them while you were talking.
Yes, please.
There's one about boredom.
Yes.
I'd quite like to answer that one. So somebody
Go
says,
for it.
you talked about sort of anxiety and overstimulation, but what about boredom? And of course, many of us with BFRBs are very familiar with boredom being a big trigger as well. And I think of that in exactly the same way. So if you think about this brain as a regulating, we're trying to regulate emotions. So overstimulation means that we need to groom to bring those emotions back down. Well, boredom is understimulation, and so it's exactly the same. So my body's understimulated, it's bored, so I need something to get me where I want to be. So if you think about the ideal as being your equilibrium, you can be above it and below it, and for us, in both directions. And that idea came from Fred Penzel, who's one of the kind of pioneers of BFRB research. The idea that grooming is a way to regulate emotions in both directions, and I think I'm a fan of that idea.
I'm so glad that you did mention that about yourself, because we often do hear about stress and anxiety and trauma, and I've heard a lot about boredom. I've never thought about the other side. And as you mentioned, I'm excited, I'm overstimulated.
Yeah.
I didn't really put that in the equation, so that's really interesting. So I'm really pleased that you mentioned that. There are so many questions, which is wonderful.
We don't know where to go. So many questions, so many great questions.
I have a question here because it relates to your story. So there's a question that's just come through. Any suggestions to help my daughter to heal the shame? Will you be sharing the notes or recording from today? I joined late. So before Professor Clare answers that, yes, there's a recording. We're recording right now. So by tomorrow, you will get, if you did register for today's event, and you'll receive an automatic email with the recording, or you can find the recording on the YouTube channel. So just go onto YouTube, typing SkinPick or typing TrichStop. You'll see the channels pop up, and you just click on there and you'll find the recording. You can go for it, Claire.
Okay, so
how do I help my daughter to heal shame?
Helping with shame. Thanks for that question, because I think it's the right question. The question is not how do I help my daughter to stop picking, pulling, biting. It's how do I help her with the shame. I think that you're already helping by asking the question that way. So
exactly.
Thank you for that. Yeah. The shame is the worst thing. For me, the shame was the worst thing, and learning how to learning self-compassion. Self-compassion sounds kind of soft and woolly and fluffy and easy. It's not. It's hard. It's a really important concept, and learning how to be compassionate about these behaviors was the thing that has helped me pull my hair out less more than anything else. So I tried for 40 years to stop pulling using all of the kind of telling myself off methods, and it never worked. But when I learned how to be self-compassionate, the urges go down, because of course all of that distress, you know, those dementors that we looked at, they're all causing distress that needs to be soothed. So that's the vicious cycle of BFRBs. And so in terms of helping your daughter with those problems, what I always say to parents or to loved ones is to try to get alongside. So recognize that shame is the bigger problem, not the picking pulling. It's the shame that's the bigger problem. And ask. So that my question is, my simple answer is always ask them what would help them. And because people often have good ideas about what would help with the shame. But I think essentially everything that I talk about is to try to help people be more compassionate and to reduce the stigma and the shame around BFRBs. Because for me, the outcome that is achievable isn't living without picking, pulling, and biting. I'm never going to live with without urges to pull. I know that I think that I will always have urges to pull out my hair, but I can live without the shame of it. And that means that my urges are much less. And it means that I don't suffer. I don't have a disorder anymore because I don't have any distress anymore. And so it's you know, maybe share some of what we've learned today with your daughter, and help normalize the behaviors to reduce the shame, and just see what she thinks that would help her. Because I tend to think that people have pretty good ideas themselves if they're asked in a compassionate way.
I agree with you. And we have, for both BFRB, skin picking and hair pulling, we do have a parent program. And this is specifically designed with parents in mind. And for those who don't know, I'm a parent of 2 kids, and both of them have a BFRB. One has skin picking and the other has hair pulling. So I do understand from that perspective. And the program is designed to help parents, first of all, just learn more about the disorder. What is it all about? And that helps to normalize it. It helps parents to not unintentionally place shame and guilt on their kids, because that so often happens without our knowledge. We so often want to just fix the problem that we notice in our kids, and sometimes that immediate reaction can come across in a negative way, if I can say that. So we have a specific program to help parents learn and deal with this, and learn how to communicate effectively with their kids without adding the shame and the guilt. We are over time.
Yeah.
If we have a couple, if Professor Clare has a few minutes left with us, we can answer a few more questions. If your question does not get answered, you are welcome to email me, and I will respond to you. Is there anything else here, Claire, that you want to answer?
Could I answer the question? Somebody asked a question about eating the hair shaft afterwards.
Yes.
And it's often the case that the what we do after we've done the picking, pulling, and biting can be more embarrassing, or more people can be more ashamed about those things even than the picking, pulling, biting themselves. And again, I'm going to refer you to a zoo, because if you go and watch what chimpanzees do after they've picked or pulled or bite, the first thing they do is put it in their mouth. So it is it's not, you know, it is kind of gross, but actually a ritual, grooming rituals almost always involve the mouth. So it's actually really common that, you know, even if you're not picking, biting, or as the act itself, it's really, really common to have a mouth-related end to the ritual. The ritual, so I've actually got a mouth-ending ritual. I don't eat the hair, but if I get a good pointy one that's a good pointy one, I always poke my lips with it. And weirdly, and I shouldn't say the word weird, but you know, it is the case that for me, if I don't do that, it feels like I'm not quite finished. And it's that sort of ritual thing, that there is that set of movements that our brains have put together, and unless you get all the way to the end, it doesn't feel like it's quite complete. And so kind of that sends you back round to the beginning again. So mouth-related rituals are also a normal part of picking, pulling, and biting. And so they don't need to be thought of as any different from any of the rest of it, I think.
I lost sight of it because there are so many questions coming through, but I just want to acknowledge, from what I remember seeing, someone said that they're reading this with tears, or not reading this, they're watching this with tears in their eyes because they feel seen and understood. And again, that's the aim of these sessions of this platform, is to remind people that we see you, we hear you, and you're not alone. And most importantly, that there is support and help out there. And it's just such an incredible show of self-love and compassion just by being here, by just showing up to this webinar. So yeah.
Since we have a few people
Much
left,
love to
can I do
everybody.
my last? I've got one more of Menti slide. If I share my slides again, can we? It's what do we most want to hear
Yes.
next time? So it's
Yes, let's do
maybe a good
it.
way to finish.
Let's do it.
Here we go. So hopefully you can see that. Oh no, that's not that one. So here's the slide that we left on. And then next we have, here's all the options that you might be interested in. And then the last slide here is the what are you most interested? So hopefully that's shown up on your phones, those of you who are still in. I can see that there's still plenty of you. If you would like to, I think you click on the thing you're most interested in, and then you can order it and then submit it, and that will tell us what you'd most like to hear about next time.
And for those who don't know, SkinPick and TrichStop love having Professor Clare here with us. So we have many planned sessions ahead with her. So understanding the urges, the consequences, why it feels so bad, the actions, motivation and reward, and getting stuck in trance-like state. I think it's just fair to say that we should do all of them, Claire.
Really just which order to do them in.
Why favor one?
Maybe we just carry on along the worm one at a time. Yeah. It's now they're all getting votes, so that's good.
I think to close off, please explain to everybody how they can get hold of your book. What is your book called?
Yes.
And where is it available?
Thank you. That's actually my last slide. Here it is. So the book is called Keep Your Hair On. And if you're not a UK based, keep your hair on is an idiom in the UK that means stay calm. So it's the opposite of like tearing your hair out. Like keep your hair on just means stay calm.
I didn't know that.
Keep your hair on, understanding urges to pick and pull and bite. It's coming out in April next year. It's all done, so I can't wait, and I'm sort of desperate to share it with you all now. And this slide also has on it all the ways you can get in touch with me if you would like to. I have you can see on there, I have a YouTube channel of my own. I link to these talks on there, so that these talks are under talks on other channels. So I have all of those on there as well. So you can find out what happened at our conference last year. You can find out a couple of things of just me talking, but mostly linking to other things. So yeah, thanks, Meryl, and look forward to next time.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just putting it out there. It's my birthday in April, so I'm perfect timing. Do you want to share those graphs or the polls that we shared at the beginning, if they've changed or developed in some way, and then we can end the session.
Let's do it. Let's see. Right. Here we have. So this is the final tally. So the trance is very popular. Sounds like that's the one to do next. Let me go back to the. Sorry, maybe I'll share it afterwards with you, Meryl, and then we can.
Okay.
It's slow.
No, don't worry.
There we go. Now I wanted to just get back to this one.
Yes.
Where am I? One back. Here we go. There you go. Okay. I love that.
Yeah. So the big ones are perfectionism, anxiety, stress, and then we've got like a fair share of the others. Addiction, facial imperfections, learned behavior, uncertainty, puberty, boredom. Sure, that's very interesting. Thank you everybody for being here, and as I said, for showing up for yourself or for a loved one. We see you and we appreciate all of you, and incredible big special thanks to Professor Clare Mackay. Thank you so much for preparing the slides and doing all of the research, and for being an incredible neuroscientist and just fellow human being. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
lovely to talk to you as always, Meryl. And yeah, anytime. I enjoy these sessions, and I'm always happy to chat about this stuff.
Yeah, me too. And if you didn't get your question answered, or if you have a follow-up, please email us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day or your evening or morning, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.